Okay, I'm back. Chapters 41 and 42. So they're averaging about 15 minutes, which is a lot shorter than when I'm lecturing in class. So I'm pretty proud of myself for that. Notice I've changed to a crown because I'm trying to do different hairstyles for every time I post, so you know which is which. Although I guess I do put titles on them too, but I was bored. I'm quarantined, so here I am. Let's look at chapters 41 and 42. Other than officers, what is the reason the Bennets are implying they need to go to Brighton? Mrs. Bennet says that she needs to take the baths and she needs to do a little sea bathing. I think I talked to you about Bath before and how Jane Austen was or lived in Bath at one point in her life and how people believe that minerals, the mineral water gave them healing powers. People also believe that the ocean could give healing powers as well. So they would go sea bathing. But a little historical side note, if you're ever on Jeopardy, the men and women did not go in the ocean at the same place. There were women's beaches and there were men's beaches. And they had these carts. And I encourage you, just Google really quick today at some point, Google image sea bathing machines. Because what they would do was they would have these carts, these large carts, not too large, but maybe, I don't know, 12 by 12 or I'm no good with numbers. Sorry, calculus, you can take this one for me. But anyway, they were good enough size, the size of a closet, a little bit bigger than a closet. Let's say that my closet's pretty big. But they would have these horses attached to these rooms on wheels. And you would walk up one side of them and the horse would then push you in, or a person would push it in if it wasn't that heavy. And it was a room. And so you're inside the room, especially if you're a woman, and you would change into your sea bathing outfit. And it would push you all the way into the ocean, into the water, far enough so that you open the back door and you would walk down the steps and there would be a person there that would know how to swim and they would hold you in the water or they would help you swim. But really the whole idea was for you to float in the salt water. So Mrs. Bennet is saying, oh, I need to go sea bathe in Brighton so that I can heal and be well, because she's always fainting. She always needs her smelling salts. Let's look at question number 2. How does the quotation, Elizabeth tried to be diverted by them, but all sense of pleasure was lost in shame, show that Elizabeth has changed? We know she has changed. She recognizes that Mr. Darcy's statements are true. They're real. And her shame, before where she would make fun of or share a sly little wink with her father about, oh, look at my mom, she's such a whack job. And dad would, ha, 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 and they'd have these little private jokes between the two of them. She's starting to recognize it's not appropriate. And my family shouldn't be acting like this. So that was very difficult for her. Number 3, how was Lydia able to go to Brighton? Lydia was able to go to Brighton because Colonel Foster married a young girl named Harriet, who was very close to the same age as Lydia, maybe a couple years older. She's probably Kitty or Mary's age, so she's probably 17 or 18. And she has attached herself to Lydia, which shows that she's not the brightest bunny in the bush. And so she's invited Lydia to go as her particular friend. And so that's how Lydia gets to go to Brighton. Number 4, what did Elizabeth do after Lydia received the invitation? And I think this is significant. There's a lot of it that's significant, but this is significant because I'm going to read to you. She could not help secretly advising her father to not let her go. She represented to him all the improprieties of Lydia's general behavior, the little advantage she could derive from the friendship of such a woman as Mrs. Foster, and the probability of her, Lydia, yet being more imprudent with such a companion at Brighton, where the temptations must be greater than at home. So Elizabeth's like, Pops, you gotta understand. This should not happen. Lydia is whack. You can't just let her go off because she's crazy and she's going to embarrass us and she's going to do all these crazy things. And then Mr. Bennet, his response, question number 5, Lydia will never be easy until she has exposed herself in some public place or other, and we can never expect her to do so with such little expense or inconvenience to her family as under the present circumstances. Once again, Father of the Year. What does Mr. Bennet do? What is his response? He does nothing. And his response to Elizabeth is like, meh, no big deal. Lydia is the kind of person, Elizabeth, that needs to be out there. She needs to show off for people. And this is all she's dreamed of her whole life. And I don't see the problem with it because, number 1, it's very little expense to me. I don't have to pay a lot of money for it. And then Mr. Bennet makes the comment a little bit later on, and I can't find exactly where, oh, it might be one of the other questions. But just on a side note, he says that there are going to be other women that are going to have larger dowries and men aren't going to waste their time on this stupid little girl. So let's continue on with the next question. The next question is number 6. Elizabeth says her character will be fixed. Her character will be fixed, and she will, at 16, be the most determined flirt that ever made herself and her family ridiculous. A flirt, too, in the worst and meanest degree of flirtation, without any attraction beyond youth and tolerable person. And from the ignorance and emptiness of her mind, wholly unable to ward off any portion of that universal contempt which her age for admiration will excite. And so she's like, Dad, listen. We can't let this happen. We can't allow her to run off because at 16 years old, she's a horrible flirt already. People already talk trash on her. They already say things about her. And this is only going to make her worse. And not only that, it continues on that Kitty's going to follow suit because she does everything that Lydia does. Dad, we've got to start checking her now. You can't let her go. You can hear the boys are chasing each other up and down, and there goes the silverback. Papa Shro, he's running down the hallway chasing the boys, and they're having tickle fights. Well, I'm working. Who's bringing home the paycheck, huh? That's right. Let's continue on. Question number 7. What is the response she receives regarding she and Jane? Do not make yourself uneasy, my love. Wherever you and Jane are known, you must be respected and valued. And you will not appear to less advantage for having a couple of, or may I say, 3 very silly sisters. Mr. Bennet is just blowing the whole thing off. He is saying, it's not that big of a deal. I don't know why you're complaining because everybody's going to see you and Jane and know that you're so much different than your sisters. They're cracking me up. I'm sorry. The boys are still running through the house and Shro's chasing them. All right. Then continuing on, we shall have no peace at Longbourn if Lydia does not go to Brighton. Let her go then. Colonel Foster is a sensible man and will keep her out of any real mischief. Oh, here it is. And she is luckily too poor to be an object of prey to anybody. At Brighton, Mr. Bennet continues, she will be of less importance even as a common flirt than she has been here. Let us hope, the officers will find women better worth their notice. Let us hope, therefore, that her being there may teach her her own insignificance. Whoa, Dad, listen to this. I'm going to repeat that quote. Let us hope, therefore, that her being in Brighton may teach her her own insignificance. Papa Bennet, I think you need to help teach your daughter her own insignificance and not push her off on somebody else and just kind of cross your fingers and hope it happens. But that's Mr. Bennet's MO. Let's continue on, darlings. What was Wickham's response at Elizabeth mentioning Colonel Fitzwilliam's name? Because if you recall, before they left for Brighton, the Bennets had people over, and Mr. Wickham was part of the people that were invited over. He looked surprised, displeased, alarmed, but with a moment's recollection and a returning smile replied that he had formerly seen him often, and after observing that he was a very gentlemanlike man, asked her how she liked him. So he was startled. He was a little bit nervous, like, oh, what should I say about Mr. or Colonel Fitzwilliam? Because I've already talked crap on Darcy. So, but what can I say about Colonel Fitzwilliam? Because he is a cool guy. Everybody does like Colonel Fitzwilliam. So I can't really say a lot. And let's continue on. Finally, question number 9. What surprised Wickham when Elizabeth replied to his question about how different Darcy and Colonel Fitzwilliam's manners were? Elizabeth's response is, yes, very different, but I think Mr. Darcy approves upon acquaintance. And Wickham says, indeed? And pray, may I ask, but checking himself, he added in a gayer tone and a happier tone, is it an address that he improves? Has he deigned to add a civility to his ordinary style? For I dare not hope that he is improved in essentials. And Elizabeth's response is, in essentials, I believe he is very much what he always was. So she's saying he's the same man that he always ever has been. And she continues, when I said that he improved on acquaintance, I did not mean that either his mind or manners were in a state of improvement, but that from knowing him better, his disposition was better understood. So Elizabeth is saying, because I took the time to get to know him, I see that he's a better man than I thought he was, which obviously does not make Mr. Wickham a very happy individual. Okay, please put the number correct over 9, darlings. Let's go ahead and continue on with chapter 42. I'm sorry, it's not exciting. You should have confetti and balloons, and maybe my boy should come in and wrestle behind us and tickle fight, and I could just lecture, and you like look around me. You see all my pictures Mr. Schroeder's supposed to hang up, and he hasn't hung up yet. Yeah, this is my office. Do my typing in here. Let's continue. Chapter 42. What do we learn about the Bennet's marriage at the beginning of chapter 42? We learn that it is a marriage of unequal affection. Her father, captivated by youth and beauty and the appearance of good humor which youth and beauty generally give, had married a woman whose weak understanding and illiberal mind had very early in their marriage put an end to all real affection for her. Respect, esteem, and confidence had vanished forever, and all his views of domestic happiness were overthrown. So we learned that Mr. Bennet fell in love with a pretty face, and he proposed to her, and by the time he realized that they were not compatible, it was too late, and he couldn't get out of it. But instead of helping his wife improve, as all marriages do, no matter how wonderful your spouse is, you still have opportunities to help them grow and develop in certain areas. Mr. Bennet doesn't. Instead, he just takes the opportunity to make fun of her and mock her. And that's not what a good husband does, what a good spouse does, a good partner does. Let's continue on. Question number 2, what had Elizabeth been blind to in regards to Wickham? She'd been blind to the impropriety of, not about Wickham, about her father. She'd been blind to his impropriety about his behavior. And why had she been blind? It's really important to point this out because Elizabeth, and this is for question number 3. Elizabeth was the favorite child. And as the favorite child, she recognized that she couldn't do any wrong when it came to her dad. And so she never had negative attention from her father, but her mother always had negative attention. And so in a sense, it was like, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't affect me. It affects you. Ha ha. Oh, it is kind of funny. Ha ha ha. And unfortunately, it was negative attention to the mother. And so Elizabeth's like, that's not how my father should behave towards his wife. And she started to recognize that even though her father treated her well, he didn't treat the rest of the family well. And she should have done a better job trying to direct her father's behavior in a positive light for the rest of the family. Question number 4, what news did she get from her aunt and Uncle Gardner about their planned trip? That the trip had to be postponed a couple of weeks because of work, and that Mr. Gardner, instead of going to the Lake Districts, which is beautiful, by the way, highly recommend it, they were just going to go as far north as Derbyshire. And in the county, there was enough to be seen to occupy the chief of their 3 weeks. And question number 5, why was Mrs. Gardner excited about the destination? Because Mrs. Gardner had grown up in a little town called, question number 7, Lambton. So she had grown up in Lambton, and so she was very excited that that's where they were going because Lambton is in Derbyshire. And question number 6, what were the Gardners' children to do while their parents were on vacation? They were going to stay with the Bennets, and Jane was going to watch them. Back to question number 7, the town of Lambton. It is believed that the town of Lambton, the fictional town of Lambton, was fabricated around, or was modeled around, I should say, the town of Bakewell in Derbyshire in England. And the estate of Pemberley was rumored to be, and I showed you guys pictures at the beginning, Chatsworth House. So once again, I encourage you to go online and look up Chatsworth House and just kind of see the scheme and the grandness of what Mr. Darcy would have lived in. Number 8, how far was Pemberley, Darcy's home, from Lambton? Not 5 miles. Number 9, who told Elizabeth that Darcy family was not in residence at Pemberley for the summer? One of the servants at the inn, if I remember correctly, before I turn the page there. A chambermaid, whether the Pemberley was not a fine place, and she said it was, and that all of the family was gone for the summer. And that's at our 15-minute max. So have a great day, and I will do post chapter 43.